So a mother is trying to wake her son one morning, and she's rapping at his bedroom door, and he's like encouraging her to go away and leave him alone. She says, "It's Sunday morning, son. It's time to go to church." Son says, "I don't want to go to church." She says, "Give me 2 reasons why you shouldn't go to church this morning." And the son says, "Well, for one thing, I don't like anybody there. And second, nobody there likes me. Give me 2 reasons why I should go." "Well, number 1, you're 54 years old. Number 2, you're the pastor." You probably know by now that I like to talk about mornings. And since I retired and moved back from Miami to Kansas City, which has been a wonderful, wonderful change for me, I've been working on a book. When you're in field ministry, you have little to no time to do anything but manage the field ministry, put together your Sunday talks, and that's about it. It's wonderful and it's exciting, but I really have always wanted to write this book about how we could wake up in the morning, suggestions on how we might wake up in the morning in a way that would improve not only the day that follows, but that would make positive changes in our own lives. Previously this year, when I was here speaking with you, I talked about 3 questions that I encourage you to ask yourself when you get up in the morning. And the first one is, am I authentic? Just checking in with yourself. Am I authentic? And what I mean by that is, from a unity perspective, we know that authenticity, living in authenticity, means living in accordance to the divine pattern from which we've been created. And there's no guilt, there's no shame here. There's just looking at it and saying, to what degree am I living in accord with things like praise and peace and joy and love and health and wealth and all of those qualities that we know as children of God are inherently ours. The second question I encouraged you to ask yourself when you get up in the morning was this. It's going to sound very simple, and it really is, but you know how we like to complicate things on the human scheme. It's, am I relaxed? And I'll just ask you that right now. Are you relaxed? You might say, yeah, I'm relaxed. But have you really checked in to see how relaxed you are? Are there any little pockets of tension or anxiety that are hanging out in you? Because, my friends, I believe this with all my heart. It is not possible for us to express in the divine manner in which we are intended to express if we're walking around all uptight with our fists clenched. We just can't do it. It's hard for the flow of life to move through us if we're uptight. So relaxation. In Unity, we encourage prayer, meditation, but whatever it might be that relaxes you, how much of that are you giving yourself? And is there any finer form of self-care that you could offer to yourself? And then finally, the third question I posed to you earlier this year, I think it was back in February, was, am I grateful? And I'm simply asking you to check in to see to what degree is your gratitude meter spiking off the chart. Because whether you realize it or not, there are always a holy host of different reasons for you to be grateful. And so often on the human scene, we forget about those. We don't look at those. We're looking at the troubles and the turmoils. And you know, an interesting fact is, whatever you look at, we're going to talk about this morning, whatever you look at tends to grow in its intensity in your experience. Have you noticed this? If you're looking at troubles and turmoil, truckloads of trouble and turmoil are going to show up at your door. And if instead you're looking for what's going right, how is the universe showing up for me in a positive, supportive way today, you'll find that begins to increase. So those are the first 3 questions. And this morning we're going to delve into the 4th question, which I think takes it to a little deeper level. And some of this may sound very superficial to those of you that have been involved in Unity for some time. I'm including it in this book because I want to be able to reach people who are not aware of the Unity way of life. But I'll tell you this, I've been in this movement all my life. I've been in ministry for decades, and I can never hear the basic Unity truth frequently enough. Because every time I hear it, especially from different voices, different perspectives, it shows up a little bit differently. I hear it a little bit differently. So keep your mind open as we explore what in Unity we would tell you is the 3rd basic fundamental Unity principle. And I know that everybody in the room knows all 5 basic Unity principles. All right, we have at least one. We're just going to focus on the 3rd principle this morning. Does anybody know what that is? Thoughts. In essence, thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. I like the rhyme of that. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. Now, we're talking about thoughts that are held in our minds. There are an infinite number of thoughts that pass and come and go very quickly in our lives, but there are those that, for whatever reason, we believe are significant enough to hold in our mind. And that's the key, is to become aware of the thoughts you are holding, that you are possessing, that you are allowing, I like to say, to purchase real estate in your consciousness. They're going to pitch a tent or build a house, but they're going to be around a while because you think they're important, whether you would admit that to yourself or not. I still surprise myself sometimes with the thoughts that I think. I've been teaching this law of mind action, the law of understanding how important it is to know what you're thinking about for so many years, and yet I can still find myself plummeting and plunging into these depths of despair with thoughts of worry and fear and doubt. Anybody understand what I'm talking about here? It happens, doesn't it? So you never have a lack of opportunity to bring this teaching of the law of mind action into your experience. Each of us, I believe, is writing, casting, directing, and producing the movie of our lives. Each one of us. And here's an interesting thing, if you haven't noticed. Nobody's got the same movie going on here. Every single individual is creating their own unique movie, their own unique production. And so often we think, well, why doesn't somebody understand this? It's so easy to see. Well, it's not easy to see if your movie's off in some other direction. And every one of us is writing a movie. Some of them are quite different, but it does not mean that each and every one of them is not totally legitimate in its own right. So can we find the ability in ourselves to say, this is my movie, and it's enough for me to take responsibility for it, just for my own movie, for my own life experience, without telling other people what their life experience or their movie ought to be like. And everybody's movie is evolving. It's evolving and it's progressing in just the way that is right and perfect for that individual. It was about a week ago, I think, Friday, that we went to see The Little Mermaid. Has anybody seen The Little Mermaid? Oh, not too many Disney fans here in the room. I went to see it mostly because it was such an influence in my own daughter's life and in my granddaughter's life. And I wanted to see how Disney has brought their magic to being able to make this a live-action film. And the first thing I have to say is, as I was watching it, I was thinking about Walt Disney. I've always felt a kinship with Walt Disney because of his vision and because of his imagination, his incredible imagination, and because of all the things that he accomplished while he was here on this earth plane. So the first thing I thought of was, man, if Disney were in the room today, and for all I know, he might have been right there in the theater, you know? But if Disney were here today, he would just be flabbergasted. He'd be blown away. He'd be so in a state of marvel over what we've been able to do with technology in films today, because it really was a brilliant production in that regard in almost every way. And then the movie went on, and, you know, I was familiar with how the plot was going to evolve and so forth. And then it came toward the end, and, you know, if you haven't seen it or you're not familiar with the storyline, there's this sea witch called Ursula, and magnificently portrayed by Melissa McCarthy. She just took it off the chart, and I love her anyway, so this was like I was totally engaged and immersed in the film. And if you know this, toward the end, this evil sea witch decides to make herself into a beautiful young lady to entice the prince away from the Little Mermaid. And in the animated film, it was like, okay, it was intense and it was evil, but it was tolerable. In the movie, from my perspective, it became very real, because when she starts whipping those octopus tentacles around, it wasn't friendly at all. She was slapping people down onto the ground. It was evil. It was, in my opinion, violent. And for just a moment, I kind of forgot that I was sitting in a movie theater. Have you ever had that happen? Where you become so engaged in the movie, it's so real for you that you forget that you're just watching a movie? I completely forgot. Now, my question of you is, what do you suppose would have happened to me and to the people in the theater if in that moment when I thought that that intensity, that violence was so realistic that I ran down to the front of the theater and started screaming at Melissa McCarthy and telling her to shape up and change your ways and stop this. This is evil. This is not productive. This is not going to help anybody. You're bad. Go away. I can tell you one thing, I wouldn't be here this morning because I would have been institutionalized last Friday evening. I would have been. And you might have been a part of that if you were there watching somebody run down and try to tell the people on the screen what to do and scream and holler at them and change their ways. It doesn't work like that, friends. And yet, how many of us spend so much time trying to manipulate people, circumstances, and situations and things out here to conform to the way we think things ought to be? Not realizing that if you want to change a movie, you can't run down to the screen and make that effort. You have to go to the projector. If you want to change what's being thrown onto the screen, you got to go to the projector. And for you and I in our movies, my friends, that projector is right up here in our own heads, and it is made up of every single thought that we are holding, that we are possessing, that we have allowed to purchase real estate in our own consciousness. It's so important, and it is enough to manage your own movie without trying to manage the movie that's played out in the world. And I believe with all my heart that if every one of us were better managing our own movies, we might find the world to be a very different place than what it seems to be today. So, without condemnation and without regret, I'm just asking you, what is it that you truly value in life? Not what do you like to tell your friends or family that you really value, but what do you really value? And the way you can tell what you value, and I'm just going to invite us all to take a deep breath here, because it has been for me a bitter truth that you are free to accept or to not accept this morning. Even longtime Unity students don't always accept this. What is happening in your life is happening because you want it to happen. You want it to happen because you value it. Now, I'm not talking about specifics here. I'm talking about experiences. There may be really unfortunate events that take place in your life, and I'm not telling you that you have to take responsibility for bringing that particular event into your life, but I am encouraging you to take responsibility for how you respond to it, how you react to it, what you make of it, what you do with it. But I stand still on that statement, that whatever you are experiencing in life is a direct reflection of what you value. You value what you value because you think it's important. And you think it's important because you want it to be important. And this is really difficult when we are having reactions that we really want to cast the blame and out into somebody or something in the world and not take responsibility for it. So it's a question I ask myself every morning is, am I willing to take responsibility for my experience of life? And you don't have to. But the alternative to taking responsibility is to live in a state of permanent, or at least, I don't like to think of it as permanent, but in the present moment, a state of victimization. And I don't know about you, friends, but I have victimized just about everybody and everything, and myself included, throughout most of my time on this planet. And I have not found it to be fulfilling, and I have not found it to be helpful. If she would change, if he would change, if this would change, if that person wouldn't have said this or done that, I wouldn't be in this state. And I don't think that's true for a single moment, my friends. I am in the state that I am in because it's the state I want to be in. I want to be in it because I've chosen it. I've chosen it because I think it has value. So if you want to know this morning what you value in your life, just look at your life. And the story, the movie that you're producing will be a reflection of what you find valuable. I'm just proposing that to you. If you don't like it, and this is important, and I think I always like to say this when I'm speaking, it doesn't really matter to me, and it might sound flip. It doesn't matter to me whether you believe anything I say or not. I mean, I don't think people should come to a Unity church or really any church to be told what they ought to believe. I think you and I are responsible for figuring that out for ourselves, and that we all have innately within us the ability to know when something resonates as being true for us and when it doesn't. And I pray that you'll never come into this space and be instructed on how you must behave or what you must do or what the rules and regulations are for you to be pleased or pleasing in the eyes of God. It's not what we do here. Every single thing that we value then is reflected in our life experience. And I'll go back in time. This would have been the very early 1970s. And I was raised in unity, and I'm grateful for that every day. But it doesn't mean I was exempt from the human condition. I grew up in a crazy house, totally unpredictable, with two bipolar members. So you never know from day to day when you live in a bipolar home exactly what's going to happen or how it's going to unfold. So it was not exactly an idyllic environment. And when I got old enough to be able to leave home and go to college, I was ready to have a really good time. I was ready to be free. And unity went on the back shelf. Well, it didn't really. It always stayed in my awareness. How many of you would say that you are kind of, it's okay, this is a safe space, rebellious? I'm super rebellious. If you want me to do something, don't tell me that I have to do it, because it's not going to happen. I'm super rebellious, so you put the fact that I was escaping this environment of my family, and I was rebellious and didn't like to be told what to do. Did I get into a lot of trouble in my first year at Kansas State University in Manhattan, Kansas? I did. A lot of trouble. It involved drugs, it involved alcohol, it involved partying, all kinds of reckless living. And I'd like to say that it was traumatic, and it did become traumatic toward the end, but I had a lot of really good times in that process. I was totally irresponsible, I didn't care, and I was having amazing adventures. And one of them was the end of the adventure for that time period, and that I did some LSD. And because I was rebellious and I wanted to check this out. And now, give me a little slack here, because this was the end of the hippie generation, okay? So that was kind of who I was. It didn't go well. I ended up dropping out of college, coming home back to my mom and dad over in Ruskin Heights is where they were living at that time. And I was in bad shape. I was depressed. I felt like I had lost my purpose for living, even being a good Unity student for all those years as a younger person. And I was trying to find myself. And one Sunday morning, my mom came home. She was a devout member and attendee at Unity Village Chapel. She came home from church, and she said, they announced this morning that there's a tour guide job open at Unity Village. Well, I was familiar with the village. I had attended YOU conferences and sort of grown up around here. So it sort of rang a bell to me. Now, you have to imagine that my hair was like down to the middle of my back, and I was anything but a likely job candidate, so I went and got a haircut, and I went in and applied for the job. It ended up that I got the job. That was in 1975, I think, that I got the job as a tour guide here. And to this day, right down the street lives Marge Dale, who was at that time with her husband over the public relations department, which handled the tours here that we used to guide people on. And I have asked her many times, why did you hire me? I have to have been the most unlikely candidate. Even with my haircut, I was still an unlikely person to get the job. And she looks at me every time and she says, you know, I don't have the foggiest idea. Now, I say all this to say that every value that you're holding, I mean, I valued escape. I valued rebelliousness. I valued a lot of things that led me to make some really poor decisions in my life. And I'm not saying those values always result in poor decisions, but they did for me. I'm saying that whatever your values are at any point in time, they are the right values for you. And they will take you to where you need to go. I actually, in 1973, when I went to college, that is when I began ministerial training, even though I didn't realize it. It wasn't textbook training, and it didn't take place in a classroom. But I learned about what life is really like. You know, to this day, if somebody comes to me with a drug or an alcohol problem, I'm not just reciting something out of some text here. I understand what that's like to go through that. So that was exactly the right path for me. And whatever you're valuing, i.e. whatever's showing up on the movie screen of your life, it's a treasure for you, and that's cool. That's wonderful. That's the way it should be. So your values are perfect. However, your values are also constantly evolving, just like your beliefs are always evolving. So if you grab hold of something today and say, this is valuable, and you use that value as a means of taking a step up to the next level in your life, if you're doing that, realize that when you get to that next level, that value, that belief may be exhausted in terms of its contribution to your well-being. So we get into this thing of thinking, well, I believe this and I'll never change, I'll never vary because that's the conviction of my belief. And to that I say, baloney. That's not what beliefs are for, and that's not what values are for. Beliefs and values, what you find to be most important in your life today, I pray that it will not be the same as what you find most important and valuable in your life in 5 years, because we're constantly growing and we're constantly expanding. So you can credit the value that you had, that you gave to things yesterday. You can credit the value of whatever you're finding important in your life today, and you can know that that's going to evolve, so don't get too attached, don't cling too tightly. Just know this is prelude to the next level of your own soul's evolution, and who knows where that may end up ultimately taking you. Here's maybe the most valuable thing I want to say, I think, this morning, speaking of values. You and I are absolutely free to decide what's important to us in any given moment. And we're also free to decide when something has expired in terms of its usefulness in our life, and it's ready to be exchanged for something that we find yet more valuable and more valuable and more valuable. But it's very important, because remember that you're not going to be holding stuff up here in your consciousness that you don't think has some merit, whether you realize it or not. And that the finger of blame can be dispelled completely, because even if we take the blame off of everybody out here and we say, I'm responsible for my own experience, it doesn't have to be blame. It can be, there's something inside of me. I'm going to call it this morning your absolute nature, your most authentic nature that is living your life, my friends. We think we're doing all this, but guess what? It's being done. We think we're living our life. Our life is being lived. You can trust that. So every step of your evolution is being meticulously and magnificently orchestrated by this higher intelligence and higher creativity. I'm even getting to the place in my life right now where I don't want to use the word God, because simply by speaking the word, because of our conditioned minds, it tends to create a separation. There's me and God. God and I are one. Well, if we're one, then what's God and I? It's all one. There is no separation. You are intrinsically a part of this oneness of the universe that is orchestrating your life individually, and I believe life on this planet. And if you're looking for anything to find hope in the midst of all the troubles and turmoils of the world right now, to me, that's it. That regardless of the individual value systems that all of us have picked in this very moment, the movies that we're producing right now, when you bring it all together, it's upward moving, progressive, forward in faith, and taking us to a better place. Please remember that when you're watching the news at night, because it's so easy to not believe that. And again, you don't have to believe it, but I have found life is much more promising, I'm more productive, and my contributions to a more peaceful planet are of greater value when I'm in that state of mind. What you think about, you bring about. What you think about, you bring about. So you may think, I'm just thinking about it. That doesn't make any difference. I'm just thinking about it. It's only a matter of time if you keep thinking about it before you bring it into your living manifestation every day. So I want to close by sharing some of what I have found ways to consciously choose the values that I want. And let me just throw this in. A lot of us are not really living out of values that we've established for ourselves. We're living out of values that we've inherited from perhaps well-meaning authorities, parental figures, teachers, religious authorities, whatever a religious authority is, please. So there are hidden levels. There are many values that we're completely unconscious of. That's why looking at your life will reveal those to you, even though it may be a little painful or have a little sting to it at times. But there are 4 different points I want to make. The first is, be as clear as you can about what matters most to you. And I encourage people to take a look at this and try to come up with some core values. What are the most important things in your life right now? Because those are the things you want to give your thought energy to. Then number 2, monitor your thoughts and feelings and beliefs to ensure they are aligned with what matters most to you. What matters most to you? Now, my next step is to try to do my best to align my thoughts, my feelings, and my beliefs with what I believe to be most important to me. Be aware when thoughts, feelings, and beliefs that I am holding are in conflict with what matters most to me. So I've established this matters most to me, but I got this thought going on over here that's not in alignment with what matters most. Don't give it any more attention than you have to, my friends. Remember, your mind is a very powerful tool, and you are creating your reality in every moment, your experience of reality, according to the content of your mind. And number 4, I'm willing to release all thoughts, feelings, and beliefs that are not in alignment. Easy said, but not always easy done. I'm just going to release that thought. Remember, my friends, you have help in this. You have the you that you've come to believe yourself to be, and then you have the absolute you. You have the authentic you that is with you every step of the way. And when you ask that authenticity that is you to help you release a thought, a feeling, or a belief that is not in alignment with what you have established to be most important by your own standards, you got help. You got the best help in the world. You're not alone in this endeavor. And you can become the most powerful person on the planet. Not that this is any form of competition, but an individual that knows what is most important to them. And I don't know what's most important to you. Only you know that. What I can tell you is that when you know what is most important to you and you align your thoughts, your feelings, and your beliefs with what is most important to you, your success is 100% guaranteed. And a person who is in that state of alignment is very, very powerful. You want to make a difference in this world? Don't look outside of yourself to make that difference. Look inside of yourself and align your thoughts, your feelings, and your beliefs with what is most important to you, and watch how this begins to take form in your life. We are always free, my friends, to change the content of our minds. We are always free to choose what is important to us and to live in total alignment and authenticity with what is most important to us. What you think about, you bring about. Now I invite you to take a deep breath, sit back, adjust your remote control, and enjoy the movie of your life.